hands clutched onto me. It wasn't just a stormy night, it was a full-blown battlefield. Outside, the hurricane howled like a pack of untamed wolves, battering our ramshackle two-story home on the outskirts of Jacksonville, Florida. My stepdad, Rick, stood there like a battle-worn warrior from a forgotten war, his eyes intermittently ignited by sparks dancing off our malfunctioning generator. The wind tore through the palm trees, snapping them like delicate twigs, while the rain hammered the roof and rattled the windows as if trying to force its way inside. At 17, I was pure, unbridled adrenaline, a wild spirit that craved danger and relished pushing every limit, even if it meant defying someone as hardened and relentless as Rick. At 48, Rick was a formidable ex-Marine turned mechanic, built like a fortress with calloused hands that mended more than just engines. They guarded shattered dreams and kept dark secrets buried deep. Yet tonight, as thunder cleaved the sky, something unexpected flickered in his gaze, a raw, unfiltered flash of fear that made the tempest around us burn even fiercer. I raced after him into the watery chaos. "Rick, wait!" I shouted, my voice nearly lost in the wind's howl. He turned abruptly, his face contorted by frustration and worry, his gray shirt clinging to his muscled frame. The storm had transformed our backyard into a quagmire, each step a struggle against the pounding rain. But nothing could slow my determination. "Lena, get back inside," he barked, his tone rough and edged with anger. Yet I wasn't ready to retreat. Not when the electricity of the moment pulsed in the air, crackling like the lightning overhead. I darted closer to him as he crouched near the generator, trying desperately to fix the tangle of live wires. My small, trembling hands clutched a flashlight that barely cut through the dark, its beam wavering like my resolve. "I can help," I insisted, even though deep down I knew nothing about machines. I was impulsive, a trait that often led me to dance dangerously close to the edge. "Stay back," Rick growled. "This thing's live. One wrong move and you're toast." I stepped forward anyway, our eyes locking in a silent battle of wills. The generator sputtered, its cover barely hanging on, when a stray spark burst forth with a sudden flash of blue. Rick's reflexes took over. He grabbed my shoulders, his calloused hands rough against the fabric of my hoodie, and shoved me away as if I were an intruder in his fragile world of repairs. For a split second, I lost my balance. I slid on the slick, rain-soaked concrete, my heart pounding in my ears. When I finally regained my footing, I saw that his hands had not immediately let go. They remained, lingering, a moment too long. In that suspended heartbeat, the intensity in his eyes met mine. It was a look that held more than anger or concern. It held something raw, a mixture of duty and a deeper, unspoken tenderness. "You didn't have to push so hard," I murmured, my voice quivering with both shock and something else I couldn't quite name. "I know you were just trying to save me." Rick jerked his hands away, his expression hardening. "Don't be an idiot, Lena. Just stay out of it." His tone was clipped, and I could feel the tension coiling like a spring between us. I took a step closer, my wet clothes clinging to my skin as I tried to bridge the gap. "You look damn good out here, fighting that storm. Bet you've fixed worse things in your day in the Marines." I smirked, a defiant glimmer lighting up my eyes despite the chaos around us. He twisted a stubborn wire with the precision of a seasoned pro, his jaw set tight as he worked. "Ships don't have crazy girls running into danger," he muttered, not looking at me but speaking as if to a silent witness. "Maybe they should," I retorted, my voice rising above the clamor of the storm. "Crazy is what keeps life interesting. Maybe you missed a bit of that since you left the service." A flash of lightning illuminated his face as he yanked the starter cord. The generator coughed and then roared back to life, its engine coughing like a wounded animal. Rick shot me a sharp, dark look, an unspoken warning that I was playing with fire. "Pushing is your thing, isn't it?" I said, edging closer despite the danger. "Bet you'd pull me back if I sell." He slammed the generator's cover shut with a force that rattled the nearby patio furniture. His knuckles brushed my wrist in passing, a contact that sent an unexpected shiver through me. "You'd fall on your own, Lena. Don't need me to catch you." I laughed softly, the sound mingling with the pounding rain. "Maybe I do need you. I can be stubborn. And maybe, just maybe, I like a little danger." Rain hammered the ground as the night deepened. The generator hummed under its newly sealed cover, but our conversation continued in that charged, suspended moment. Rick's eyes softened for just a split second as he regarded me with a mixture of exasperation and something else I couldn't quite decipher. The storm outside wasn't the only thing raging that night. "Lena," he said, his voice low and almost reluctant. "You're too headstrong. One day, that headstrong streak is going to get you hurt." I took another step closer, letting my arm brush against his damp, weathered sleeve. "And you're too stubborn not to see that sometimes, falling is part of living. You might even enjoy catching me." Before he could reply, a sudden sound shattered our fragile truce. The back door banged open, and in that instant, reality intruded. My mom's voice, sharp and insistent, echoed from the hallway. "Rick, Lena, get inside right now." I jerked back, my heart pounding as I realized the moment had been broken. Rick snatched a rag from his pocket as if on autopilot and began wiping his hands clean, all traces of the storm's intimacy disappearing with each ragged swipe. I didn't wait. I bolted toward the safety of the house, leaving him by the generator, a lone sentinel in a night that was far from over. Inside, the house was dimly lit by flickering lights and the constant patter of rain. I could still hear the low rumble of thunder as I grabbed a set of towels from the hallway. My mind was still reeling from the confrontation outside, the adrenaline mingling with a strange sense of exhilaration. A few days later, the hurricane's fury had subsided. The heavy rain had finally stopped, but the memory of that night lingered in every corner of our home. In our modest house in Jacksonville, the air still felt heavy and damp, like a secret that refused to be forgotten. The scent of wet concrete and salt hung in the hallways, a constant reminder of the chaos. My mom had returned to her job at the insurance office, dealing with the endless paperwork that followed any storm. The phone calls, the claims, the worry etched into her every word, it was all routine for her. Meanwhile, I found Rick on the back porch, scrubbing mud off the rain gutters with a wire brush. His old flannel shirt was rolled up to his elbows, and he worked with a steady, determined focus. Barefoot on the wet boards, I leaned against the railing, watching him. The sight of him, lost in concentration, stirred something deep within me. He didn't look up as I approached. He was completely absorbed in the task at hand, cleaning, scrubbing, as if trying to erase the storm from our home. "You're getting too carried away," I teased lightly, stepping closer. My words barely made it past the soft patter of a new rain shower that had begun outside. He paused, the brush suspended midair, and gave me a narrow, gruff glance. "I'd better not track mud into this house," he said, his tone a mix of annoyance and resignation. I kicked a pebble off the porch. "You always loved hot cleaning up. Bet you scrubbed worse wrecks than this back in the service." He resumed his work, his elbow flexing near me, as if to emphasize that he was unperturbed by my teasing. "Ships don't talk back," he muttered, and I couldn't help but laugh at his stubborn response. I moved closer again, letting my knee graze the chair he dragged out for more support. "Talking back is my charm," I said, teasingly. "Maybe you missed that on the high seas." For a moment, Rick's eyes softened, a silent admission of the playful banter that had always been part of our charged relationship. "Charm isn't the word," he grumbled, shaking his head. "More like a headache." "Headaches keep you sharp," I replied, leaning on the chair with a conspiratorial smile. "Bet you've handled storms that'd make my head spin." He grabbed a rag, wiping his hands with a casual precision. His fingers brushed the edge of my wrist, a touch so brief it sent sparks through my veins. "Storms don't run into messes, Lena. They overcome them," he said, his tone now more contemplative, almost wistful. I slid even closer, my arm gently brushing his sleeve as I picked up the brush he'd dropped. "You look so intense when you're in your element," I whispered, admiring the way the dim porch light accentuated the lines on his face. "Maybe you wrestled bigger messes than these all your life." His eyes flickered to mine. "Messes don't flirt, Lena. And neither do I." Yet the warmth in his tone betrayed his words. I laughed softly, bumping his shoulder playfully. "Maybe falling over your own game is what makes it fun. Bet you'd catch me like last time, wouldn't you?" Rick shifted his weight, nudging his leg as if trying to avoid the teasing altogether, but the smile that tugged at the corners of his mouth said otherwise. "Catching isn't a promise, Lena. Don't count on it." I leaned in, our faces inches apart in the muted glow of the setting sun. "Counting is overrated. I like the risk. And besides, sometimes you just have to let yourself fall." For a long moment, we stood there in silence, the only sound the soft rustle of the wind through the trees and the distant murmur of a receding storm. In that silence, I sensed an unspoken understanding, a fragile bond formed through shared danger and unyielding defiance. The porch creaked under the weight of our conversation. I slowly reached out and brushed my fingers along his damp hand, the contact electric and full of promise. "I'll always be the storm you never saw coming," I murmured, almost to myself. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through the quiet evening. "And I'll always be here to weather it, whether I like it or not." Weeks passed, and the remnants of the hurricane lingered like ghosts around our home. The sky over Jacksonville had cleared to a soft, leaden gray, but inside our house, the aftershocks of that wild night continued to reverberate. The halls were filled with whispered conversations and half-forgotten arguments, yet for me, the storm was far from over. One rainy afternoon, I found myself alone in the living room. The ambience was dim, punctuated only by the slow ticking of the clock and the occasional drip from a loose roof tile. I sat on the faded sofa, a mug of lukewarm coffee in my hands, and let my thoughts wander back to that unforgettable night. Rick was in his little office off the hall, a cramped room cluttered with old maps, yellowed documents, and the constant hum of his meticulous work. The desk was littered with pencils, scraps of paper, and faded photographs from his days in the service. I quietly crept closer, drawn by the familiar scent of engine oil and rain. He was hunched over one of the maps, tracing routes with a pencil as if mapping out a course through treacherous waters. I couldn't help but admire his focus. "You always did have a knack for navigating storms," I said softly, breaking the silence. He didn't look up at first. Instead, he continued marking lines on the map, each stroke deliberate and precise. "Storms don't need navigation, Lena," he replied eventually, his voice low and thoughtful. "They just are. You survive them, sometimes by sheer luck." I moved closer, setting my coffee mug gently on the desk. My hand hovered near his elbow as I leaned on the edge, our proximity a silent acknowledgement of all the unspoken things between us. "Maybe surviving isn't enough," I said. "Maybe sometimes you want to ride the storm, feel its power, and even get swept away." His gaze finally met mine, and in his eyes I saw the flicker of memories long buried, of turbulent nights on roaring seas, of battles fought not just against nature but within himself. "You're reckless, Lena," he murmured. "And that can be dangerous." "Maybe so," I countered, "but it's what makes me feel alive. And I wouldn't trade these moments for anything." I brushed my hand against his, a silent invitation wrapped in the softness of my touch. Rick's expression softened, and for a brief moment, the storm inside him seemed to quiet. "You've got fire, kid," he said, almost admiringly. "I worry that one day, that fire might burn you too fast. Or maybe it'll keep me warm through the coldest nights," I replied with a gentle smile. I always thought storms brought out the best in people, the courage to face the wild and the hope that something beautiful could emerge from the chaos. His lips twitched, a half-smile that hinted at both amusement and regret. "You're a wild one, Lena. But maybe that's exactly what this old sailor needs." That day, as the sun began to set and cast long shadows across the room, we talked for hours. We spoke of the past, of battles fought on stormy seas, of lost loves, and of the secrets that lay hidden in the quiet moments between thunderclaps. I learned more about Rick than I ever had before. The scars he carried were not just physical but deep, silent marks of a life spent weathering storms. The conversation was punctuated by soft laughter and moments of shared understanding. In that little office cluttered with memories, we forged a connection that went beyond the chaos of that fateful night. It was a fragile truce, a promise that even in the midst of life's wild tempests, we would find moments of calm, of understanding, and perhaps even a spark of hope. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of the hurricane began to weave itself into the tapestry of our everyday life. The house in Jacksonville, once a battleground of nature's fury, now seemed to hold a quiet resilience. Yet beneath the calm surface, a storm still raged between Rick and me, a tempest of emotions that defied easy explanation. One particularly humid evening, after a day of relentless heat and a sky heavy with impending rain, I found myself in the kitchen alone. The old refrigerator hummed in the background as I prepared a simple dinner. I couldn't shake the thoughts of that night, of sparks, of shouts, of the raw intensity that had left us both breathless. The door creaked open, and Rick entered. His damp hair clung to his forehead, and the fatigue of the day was etched into every line on his face. He leaned against the counter, watching me with an intensity that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Need any help?" he asked, his voice soft, almost vulnerable. I shook my head, offering a small smile. "I'm just making dinner. Nothing fancy, just something to keep the night at bay." He walked closer, and I could see that even the smallest details, like the way the fluorescent light in the kitchen highlighted the salt and pepper in his beard, seemed to matter. "Lena," he began, hesitating as if the words were heavy with meaning. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened." I paused, stirring the pot slowly. "I have too," I admitted. "That night changed things. Changed the way I see you, and maybe the way I see myself." The room filled with a charged silence as the weight of our unspoken words pressed down. "I worry about you," he said finally, his tone gentle yet laced with an underlying sternness. "Your recklessness, it's beautiful, but it scares me." I turned to face him, my eyes reflecting a mix of defiance and tenderness. "I'm not afraid of storms, Rick. I'm not afraid of the rain. I just don't want to be sheltered all the time. Sometimes, I need to feel the chaos, to know that I can survive it." He looked at me for a long moment, his gaze searching, as if trying to map the contours of my soul. "Maybe I do want to be there to catch you," he murmured, almost to himself. "But I also need you to understand that sometimes, even the strongest of us can't always control the outcome." I reached out, placing my hand over his calloused one. "Then let's face it together," I said softly. "Whether it's a hurricane outside or a storm within, we'll weather it. I'm not asking you to change. I'm just asking you to be honest, with me, with yourself." The sincerity in my words hung in the air, mingling with the lingering warmth of the day. Rick's eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment, the distance between us seemed to vanish. In that quiet exchange, there was hope, a promise that even the most tumultuous storms could lead to a calmer, if uncertain, horizon. It wasn't long after that conversation that another storm, this time of a different kind, began to brew within our lives. The memory of the hurricane had faded into the background, but the emotional residue remained, woven into the fabric of our daily routines. The days grew longer, and as summer gave way to the cooler embrace of early fall, the unspoken tension between Rick and me simmered beneath the surface. One crisp evening, with a gentle rain misting the streets of Jacksonville, I found myself wandering the quiet corridors of our house. The living room, now bathed in the soft glow of table lamps, was a far cry from the chaotic night of the hurricane. Yet every creak of the floorboards, every whispered rustle of the wind outside, reminded me that storms, no matter how gentle, always leave their mark. I walked slowly to the back porch, where I remembered the generator still humming faintly in the darkness, a relic of that wild night. There, I found Rick sitting alone on a weathered wooden bench, his gaze fixed on the dark horizon. The tension in his posture was palpable, and I could sense the heavy thoughts weighing on him. "Mind if I join you?" I asked softly, not wanting to disturb the fragile silence. He glanced over, his eyes tired but welcoming. "Not at all," he replied, his voice carrying the quiet resignation of someone who had seen too many storms. "Sometimes, I need to be alone with my thoughts." We sat side by side, the silence stretching between us like a delicate thread. After a long while, Rick broke the stillness. "You know, Lena, I've spent my life trying to fix things, engines, broken parts, even the chaos that comes after a storm. But some things just can't be fixed with a wrench." I looked at him, understanding all too well. "Maybe not," I said. "But sometimes, we can learn to live with the damage. We can rebuild, even if it's not exactly the same." His eyes glistened in the porch light. "I worry that if I let you get too close, I'll end up breaking you too. I see how the storms have shaped you, how they've made you both fearless and fragile. And I'm not sure I have the strength to handle that kind of fire." I reached out, laying my hand over his. "The fire isn't meant to burn you out, Rick. It's meant to warm you. And maybe, in time, you'll see that sometimes the most broken parts of us can shine the brightest." He sighed deeply, and for a long moment, we simply sat together, united by our shared experiences and unspoken promises. The rain continued to fall, a soft, rhythmic lullaby that spoke of renewal and the promise of a new dawn. That night, as I returned to the house, I carried with me a renewed sense of determination. The storms of our lives, both the ones outside and the ones within, would always be there. But perhaps, with time, we could learn to embrace them, to see the beauty in their chaos, and to find solace in the quiet moments that followed. Months passed, and the memory of that fateful hurricane gradually transformed into a part of our shared history. The house in Jacksonville bore the marks of the storm, a few broken windows, water-stained walls, and memories etched in every corner. Yet, it also held a new kind of beauty, a resilience born from having faced the worst that nature could throw at us. My mom returned to her daily routines at the insurance office, a quiet strength in her eyes as she handled each claim with professional detachment. And Rick? He continued to be the steadfast presence in our lives, his rough exterior softened by the lessons learned in the wake of chaos. There was an unspoken understanding between us now, a tacit agreement that even when storms ravaged our world, we would be there for one another. I often thought back to that night, the sparks, the shouts, the lingering touch of his calloused hands on my wrist, and realized that it wasn't just about surviving the storm. It was about finding a way to connect, to reveal our vulnerabilities, and to trust that even in the darkest hours, there was hope. The storm had changed us. It had stripped away our pretenses, leaving behind raw truth and an undeniable bond. In the quiet moments after the storm, I would sit on the back porch and watch the sky shift from stormy grays to the soft hues of twilight. I'd recall the intense look in Rick's eyes, the mix of anger, concern, and something deeper, something that spoke of a past filled with battles and a future full of uncertain promises. I'd remember how we had stood there, drenched and defiant, challenging fate even as it threatened to tear us apart. And as the seasons changed, so did we. Our conversations grew longer, our silences more comfortable. The playful banter that once masked our fears gave way to heartfelt confessions. I learned that behind his gruff exterior lay a man who had endured loss and hardship, who carried the weight of his past with a quiet dignity. I discovered that my own wild streak was not just a badge of rebellion, but a testament to my refusal to be broken by life's relentless tempests. There were nights when we'd sit together on the porch, the distant hum of the neighborhood merging with the sound of crickets and the gentle rustling of leaves. In those moments, the world seemed to pause, leaving us suspended in a shared dream where the storm was not an enemy, but a catalyst for growth. I'd trace the scars on Rick's hands and imagine all the battles he had fought, both on distant seas and in the quieter wars of his heart. And he, in turn, would listen as I spoke of my hopes, my fears, and the fiery passion that drove me forward. Sometimes, when the wind picked up or the rain began to fall unexpectedly, I'd catch a glimpse of that wild night, a night of sparks and defiance, and I'd smile. It was a reminder that life was unpredictable, that the forces that sought to break us could also bind us together. And in that binding, there was beauty. There was a promise that no matter how fierce the storm, we would find our way back to each other. Now, as I write these memories, I know that the storm will never truly leave us. It will live on in our laughter, our heated arguments, our tender moments of understanding, and even in the silence of a shared gaze. The past is a part of us, a mosaic of pain, passion, and ultimately, resilience. This is our story. A tale of storms, sparks, and the undeniable truth that sometimes, the wildest tempests bring forth the most unexpected love. It is a story of survival, of embracing the chaos, and of finding beauty in the aftermath. And as long as the rain falls and the winds blow, I know that Rick and I will continue to navigate this unpredictable world,